Localization is a practice that takes a form of media and works to fit the cultural norms of a certain country. While sometimes it's as simple as translating text, other times it can be massive changes to the product. The 1993 movie Demolition Man, starring Sylvester Stallone and Wesley Snipes, featured a world where the only fast food restaurant in existence is Taco Bell. But in non-English versions of the film, everything from visuals to dialogue were changed to Pizza Hut due to lack of brand recognition. In the anime series One Piece, based off of the manga of the same name, the character Sanji is seen sucking on a lollipop in international versions, whereas he smokes a cigarette in the original Japanese dub as he did in the manga. While some localizations are able to get off easy with a few changes, some products are unable to be localized due to various reasons. It can be licensing and/or copyright issues, the content is too vulgar, the developer doesn't have the funds to localize the game, etc. But I feel that video games seem to get the most attention when it comes to localization. I think it's because certain games are made with certain people's tastes in mind, and when the developer decides to bring the game to other places in the world, serious changes may need to be made to adhere to certain cultural norms and policies. The Nintendo Entertainment System version of Bionic Commando by Capcom is notorious for its Japanese version being about a group of neo-Nazis trying to resurrect Hitler. The Japanese title is even called Top Secret Hitler's Revenge. When the game was released outside of Japan, all Nazi references were erased, and they're now called the Bads, though you still kill Hitler in a rather grisly manner in the end. These are some games that were unable to be localized due to various reasons. As a disclaimer, I will not be talking about any licensed games, as usually the license only allows the developer and publisher to release the game in a specific region, and it's a far too easy target. Without further ado, let's go. Square's Tom Sawyer was a game released on the Family Computer, the Japanese version of the Nintendo Entertainment System, in 1989. It was based on the book The Adventures of Tom Sawyer by author Mark Twain. It's notable for being developed by Squaresoft, who would eventually go on and develop the Final Fantasy series. It's also notable for featuring side-scrolling elements, unlike traditional RPGs at the time which had a more top-down perspective. The game also sets itself apart by the fact that the characters can't equip weapons and only fight with their fists, though the player can collect a large number of items throughout the game. While the game would have easily passed off as an obscure, Japan-only Famicom game, the game has become notable for featuring some rather outdated depictions. Characters from the book like Jim and Injun Joe make appearances in the game, but they're characterized with racist stereotypes. The most notable is Jim, who's seen with large lips, a common stereotype of African Americans. Japan has had a history of using negative racial stereotypes and portraying foreigners in the media. Characters like Jinx from the Pokemon series and Mr. Popo from the Dragon Ball series used racist characteristics and had their official designs changed following controversy over the original designs. The blackface in the game was further corroborated by Takashi Tokita, an artist who worked on the game, stating that there were no standards and practices at the time to ensure that games didn't have negative stereotypes. While on the topic of the NES, the system has had a history of unlicensed games being released for the system. These games didn't have the seal of approval from Nintendo, and it was to circumvent Nintendo's strict policies at the time of how many games a company could release at a time. It also allowed them to make their own cartridges and not go by the standard cartridge that Nintendo had allowed. One of these companies that developed unlicensed games was a company called Wisdom Tree. Originally called Color Dreams, Wisdom Tree was a company that developed Christian-based video games and sold them at Christian bookstores. All of them were unlicensed. There is, however, a Christian-based video game that not only has the seal of approval from Nintendo, but it was also published by Konami, and that game is Noah's Ark for the NES. The game was developed by British studio Source, and is a very loose take on the Bible story. The game has you play as Noah as you travel the entire world rescuing animals on all 7 continents, including Europe, North America, South America, and much more. The game was released in 1992 on the NES exclusive to Europe, and published by Konami's European branch. There were plans to release the game in North America, but it was likely that due to Nintendo of America's ban on religious references in games, as well as the Super Nintendo Entertainment System already being out at this point, it wasn't worth localizing the game for US audiences. The game's obscurity and cult status was enough for Wisdom Tree themselves to launch a Kickstarter campaign to release the game in August 2017. The project was successful, raising $17,000 on a $15,000 goal, allowing the only NES licensed Christian game to have a second life. It's weird not to think of the studio Game Freak and not think of the Pokemon franchise. But prior to Pokemon Red and Blue's release in 1996, Game Freak also developed video games for other publishers, such as the Japanese exclusive Pulseman for the Sega Mega Drive and the platformer Smart Ball for Sony on the SNES. They also developed Yoshi, a puzzle title for the NES and Game Boy based off the character Yoshi from Super Mario World. In 1993, Game Freak released a puzzle side-scrolling title exclusively for the Super Famicom, known as Mario and Wario. In the game, you don't play as Mario nor Wario, but an original character named Wanda, who helps guide Mario through a series of levels after Wario drops objects on him and is unable to see. The game uses the Super Nintendo Mouse, an add-on for the system that allows the game to have a point-and-click feature and allows Wanda to interact with objects in the game and change Mario's direction if needed. Upon release, reception was generally positive, though some criticized the early levels for being too easy and the use of the Super NES mouse, which made the harder levels more difficult. Sales were also moderately successful as well, with lifetime sales in Japan being 490,000 copies. So why was this game never released outside Japan? It's likely because the addition of the Super NES mouse along with the game brought up the retail cost, as well as the fact that you don't actually play as Mario. Now, Mario Paint came included with the SNES mouse upon release, but that came with tons of features in the game, from a paint program to music composition software, and it also sold over 2 million units. So when comparing the two games, Mario and Wario was a financial flop in Nintendo's eyes, so they decided against localizing it. Though the game has found a second life in the form of references in Game Freak's other video games, as well as trophies and spears in the Super Smash Bros. Series. Karaoke is a popular pastime in Asia, especially in Japan. Loads of places dedicated to karaoke rooms are numerous throughout the country. The pastime has also become popular for video games, most notably the Karaoke Joy Sound series, based off the Joy Sound brand, a series of karaoke machines in Japan. The Japanese studio Lindworm, who would eventually become Japan's studio, decided to take the idea of karaoke and put into another popular form of media: voice acting. The game Yowaki Namatiko was a game released exclusively in Japan in 2001 for the PlayStation 2. The game features a similar gimmick to that of karaoke. With a USB microphone that you would plug into the PS2's USB unit, you would be given a scene that you would have to act in, and on cue you would speak your lines, and at the end of the scene you'd be scored based on your performance. The game is also notable due to the game's art style being done by Spumco, the animation studio that was run by former animator John Kricfalusi, who is most well known for the Ren and Stimpy series. And when looking at footage, there's definitely a Ren and Stimpy-esque feel to it. A sequel under the name Yowaki Namatiko's Second Act was followed a year later. So why was this game never released outside of Japan? Judging by reviews, people enjoyed the game, though they found the visuals to be a bit too cartoonish. But overall, it was a great party game. While there has never been an official reason, it's most likely due to the cost of the game, as it came bundled with a USB headset mic, which would have upped the game's cost at retail. There's also a heavy amount of text that would have needed to be translated as well. While some of the game is in English, a lot of the spoken dialogue and text is in Japanese, which means there would have to be a lot of translation work to be done on the game before release. And finally, and this I think is the most likely reason, the vulgar content in the game, ranging from racist caricatures of certain characters to the more raunchy aspects, would have set the general public off. The PS2 was marketed as more than just a video game console, so to have a game on the shelves that featured a rather grisly horror sequence and massive amounts of blackface, the game would have been controversial, if not outright banned. The Super Smash Bros. Series by Nintendo was pivotal in setting the standard for the party fighting game genre. Featuring a wide variety of characters from different Nintendo franchises, multiple stages and modes, Super Smash Bros. Has something for everyone. But of course, with every successor, there comes other games wanting to have a piece of the pie. Smash clones started to pop up following the success of Super Smash Bros. Brawl on the Wii, with the first one I remember being Cartoon Network Punch Time Explosion, a Smash clone featuring characters from Cartoon Network shows that was originally released on the Nintendo 3DS in 2011, before a port on the PlayStation 3, Wii, and Xbox 360 followed shortly after. Nowadays, the current Smash clones are Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl, which features characters from Nickelodeon shows, and the upcoming Multiverses, a free-to-play game featuring characters from the Warner Bros. Catalog. But there's one game that was also a Smash clone that was exclusive to Japan, and featured characters from the studios Konami, Hudson, and Takara. DreamX TV World Fighters was released exclusively in Japan on December 18, 2003, and meant as a collaboration between Konami, Hudson, and Takara. The game features characters from the previously mentioned studios, including characters like Solid Snake from the Metal Gear series, Simon Belmont from Castlevania, and even characters from toy lines like Optimus Prime from Transformers. While the game features similar gameplay to Super Smash Bros., this game's gimmick is fighting characters until their life bar depletes, which are represented by coins. When the character's life bar is almost gone, they will shrink in size and their soul will fly around the stage. If the player catches the character's soul, that character will die. The story follows a TV program known as World Fighters, which is struggling in the ratings. In order to boost the ratings, the show's hosts Mujo and Haruna bring characters from different series to pit themselves against one another. The better your performance at each level, the better the ratings. But if the ratings drop to 0%, the player immediately loses. Reception to the game was average, with many commenting that while it's competent, you'd be better off playing a Smash Bros. Game. While there are no official sales figures, it's likely that the game sold poorly. It's also likely that the game did not get localized because outside the familiar characters from Konami and Hudson, many characters are virtually unknown outside of Japan, especially the characters from Takara. While you have characters like Optimus Prime and Tyson Granger from Beyblade here, others like Asuka from Psy-Girls and Lika-chan, the Japanese equivalent to Barbie, are unknown outside of Japan other than a niche fanbase. Now, some may say that Marth and Roy's inclusion into Super Smash Bros. Melee allowed Fire Emblem to the West after being a Japan-exclusive series, but that's because the series came from a well-known company, so the brand recognition allowed the series to come to the West. DreamWorks TV World Fighters will forever live on as an obscure Smash clone with some interesting character choices. Capcom's Lost Planet series is a third-person shooter following several protagonists on EDN3, a planet facing an ice age as they fight several aliens and survive the environment. It was created during a time when many Japanese studios were developing games on next-gen hardware and to appeal to Western audiences. But there was a game in this series that was developed and released exclusively to Japanese audiences and features a more anime and manga art style, and that game was the spin-off EX Troopers, or pronounced in Japanese as X Troopers. The game, released in 2012 for the Nintendo 3DS and PlayStation 3, was meant to be a spin-off of the series. Unlike the previous entries, which featured a more serious and grounded style of gameplay as the series was meant to be about surviving in harsh conditions, EX Troopers has a more dynamic style of gameplay, similar to platformers and Capcom's Devil May Cry series, as the game allows you to juggle firearms at enemies. Thermal energy is now used to charge up special attacks and restore your life bar, rather than to survive in the previous games up to that point. Reception to the game was positive. While critics were surprised at first by the change in art style and tone, many complimented the visual style, saying that it was a fun way to tell the story. In November 2011, trademarks were filed in North America and Europe, hinting at a possible localization of the game, but nothing ever came to pass. The game was never meant to be released outside of Japan, as since the previous entries were made with Western gamers in mind and their tastes, EX Troopers for that matter was made for Japanese gamers and their tastes. And even if Capcom had considered localizing the game's drastically low sales at launch had canceled plans for good. Upon release, the 3DS version sold 17,402 copies, while the PS3 version sold only 8,717 copies. It's likely because on the same day as EX Troopers release, November 22, 2012, the initial Japanese release of Call of Duty Black Ops 2 was released on the same day. Because of these sales, EX Troopers was a financial bomb and became one of the lowest-selling Lost Planet games in the series to date, killing any plans for localization. The Nintendo Wii was originally released on November 19, 2006, and it was meant to be marketed towards the more casual crowd. So while there were some games to appeal to the hardcore gamers, many games were party games that groups of people could play, and the games had varying levels of success. So, Ubisoft decided to cash in on this and create a party game for a much older crowd, and what came about was We Dare. Released in March 2011 in Europe and in April 2011 in Australia for the PlayStation 3 and Wii, the game was marketed as something of an adult-oriented game with many sexy mini-games that you and your partner could play together to spice things up. In actuality, the game has very mild sexual themes, with only a few games having some sexual undertones, making this something akin to a Mario Party ripoff. The game, however, became the subject of some controversy when a trailer was released following a rather mild age rating, given the game's advertising as well as being released on the Wii, a console many considered to be family-friendly. Upon its release, the game received generally negative reviews and sold poorly, with reviewers criticizing the minigames being nothing new and the overall poor quality of the game. The controversy following the initial trailer killed any plans for a North American release, though it's received some cult popularity thanks to a video made by YouTuber Scott Wozniak, better known as Scott the Woz, where he lampoons the game and its supposed goal to get people laid. Before we go into the final entry, let's give a quick rundown of some honorable mentions and why they were never localized. Popeye's English Game, a Japanese exclusive Famicom game based on Nintendo's Popeye, which is meant to teach people English. Never released outside of Japan because of the amount of English speakers in the West. A Week of Garfield, another Famicom game based on the comic Garfield, released only in Japan due to licensing difficulties despite the game being completely in English. Sergeant Saunders Combat, a Super Famicom game based on the TV series Combat, released in 1995 exclusively in Japan. Most likely not released due to anticipation of the upcoming release of the Nintendo 64, though a prototype of the English version was sold on eBay in 2004, but the ROM has yet to be dumped online. Battle Stadium DON, another Smash clone released in 2006, the PS2 and GameCube, featuring characters from the Dragon Ball, One Piece, and Naruto series, not released outside of Japan, likely due to licensing difficulties, and to anticipate the upcoming release of next-gen consoles. Altered Beast on the PS2, a reboot of the Altered Beast franchise by Sega, released in Japan and Europe in 2005, not released in North America due to poor reception of the game upon release, and Sega being more selective to what they localized from Japan. Kyoei Toshi, a Japanese exclusive PlayStation 4 game about a city ravaged by kaiju monsters and giant robots, featuring characters from Godzilla, Ultraman, Neon Genesis Evangelion, and more, likely not released due to licensing and some franchises being unknown outside Japan. And now we get to our final entry, and it's about a previously mentioned form of media popular in Japan: voice acting. In Japan, voice actors share the same popularity as an idol, with many having international fan clubs and fans watching a particular series just because their favorite VO artist is in there. And with many Japanese voice actors having a crossover career in singing and live action, many VO artists have A-list celebrity status in Japan. In 2014, Bandai Namco decided to take it up a notch and released the game CV Casting Voice for the PlayStation 3, where the game puts you in the producer's chair as you direct and manage various voice actors. While management games are nothing new, this was the first game that I could find that is specifically about voice acting, rather than something of a gimmick as seen in Yowaki Namatiko, or something that's in the background of a game and more or less a dating sim. The game follows you as a producer who was asked to be a stand-in for another producer who became unavailable at the last minute. From there, you interact with the voice actors, cast them in various projects, and give them the proper direction after taking a look at the script. During the recording process, it becomes a quick-time event as you have to hit the button at the right time to cue in the voice actors. After the recording session, you're graded for your direction, and the better score you get, the higher up the producer pyramid you go. The end goal is to achieve the different endings with the different voice actors that you interact with, and each one has their own ending. You also can interact with voice actors by texting them, or you can gain insights on actors or the VO industry by going online or reading magazines, to name a few. While the game features a wealth of things for the actors to voice in, including Namco's own Tales of series, the final product is just a still image over voiceover, and it really shows how cheaply made this game was. Backgrounds are just real-life backgrounds rather than being hand-drawn, and even though there's a story mode, a lot of the marketing was about how you can record yourself reading the scripts available with the USB mic if you plug it into the USB port on the console. It kind of overshadowed the story aspect of the game, but I think it's only a very specific USB mic that you can use, as I tried using my own USB mic, but the game couldn't detect it. This kind of takes away some of the replayability if you can't record the same script that the characters in the game record. Because the game was released so late into the PS3's life, the PlayStation 4 was already out at this point, so it wasn't worth localizing the game, even though the game was developed in-house by Bandai Namco. Sales didn't help much either, as the game only sold 20,000 copies in its lifetime, most likely due to the PlayStation 4 being out. But they did have some faith in the game, as they released DLC for the game, but that has since expired.